But if you have the right people, and that is truly who you want to be reaching, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Something that comes up a lot for our own prospects and new customers, which is audience size, and educating them on, hey, you think you're only going after a very, very small number of accounts, and that may work for some businesses, but oftentimes you have to build larger audiences. So Hana, how do you build, larger audiences that still make sense for MadKudu without, just broadcasting to everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is tricky. And I would say that sometimes it can feel really difficult to do that without technology. I'm obviously a little bit biased and have the privilege of using our own tools. So when we're thinking about what other audience could we tack onto this to broaden it out, we're able to segment. Well, first of all, we're able to kind of reveal a lot of folks that are coming to our website. And so we know that there's some sort of engagement there. We know where they fall in terms of our ICP and if they're a good fit or not. So I think it's really critical that if you can leverage that information around, are the people coming to our site a good fit versus is everyone just coming to our site and should we just kind of throw them into a lookalike campaign? So it's really important for us to really narrow in on the good fits and the very good fits, for example. So that allows us to take the audience that, say, we're feeling confident about, but it's not big enough, and then layer in some of the things that are okay, we may not know who these people are, but we know the account and we know that they're active. We know that they're a good fit. We know that they're engaged at some level. So while we don't have, necessarily all of the criteria to do a very one-to-one campaign, we can still figure out different layering criteria to then expand that audience and reach them, whether it's just knowing that account name and what our buying group looks like, knowing that account name and their title, things like that. So that's kind of how we approach that scenario in blowing up an audience when we need to, because we know some of these tools, you have to have that larger size. And I don't think it's necessarily bad to have a smaller audience. LinkedIn will wag their finger at you and say, your audience size is too small. Yes, that is fine if you know what the implications are. You know that it's going to be more expensive. You know that it's going to, and that's the number one thing, the cost driver, right? But if you have the right people, and that is truly who you want to be reaching, that's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you understand, again, what that looks like from, a cost per click perspective, an acquisition perspective, and so on and so forth.
So you mentioned implications. Sidney, what are some of those implications of, targeting smaller audiences that people might not be aware of?
Well, I think you hit one on the head there was, CPMs and your CPCs are going to be higher. Don't freak out. It's okay. That's, you're paying, you pay a premium to target that way. And, depending on the platform you are on, it might depend, your reach is going to maybe look a little bit different. Even I like to look at, okay, what does the platform say my audience size is? And then based on my budget per month, what percent of my reach am I getting in that total audience? And you're never going to get 100% because not everybody's online and an active user that could be served. But the nice thing about that I see a lot of times is when we go into smaller audiences or subsets, we might have a larger ICP audience and we have a couple of subset, very specific audiences that we may want to tailor messaging to, or we just want to observe the metrics in platform compared to the larger one. So cost is one, but if your messaging is tailored, which it should be if you're going to spend a premium to reach those people, you should see higher engagement. So it's worth the extra upcharge, in my opinion, if you're reaching the right people with a more tailored message, maybe than your broader campaigns. And you kind of have to let the data tell you a little bit here. And it's a little bit of, there's no black, white, this is working, this is not. You kind of have to give it your gut instinct. But those are like the two main things. And then you're going to have to ramp up your creative faster, and you're going to need to have the resources in place to do that, to not fatigue your audience. It's going to be smaller. You'll likely get a higher percentage of reach within that audience compared to your larger audience of like 100,000 people. You might get like 50,000 reach or something, depending on your budget. If it's 40,000 people, you might get a higher than a 50% on that audience, but it's going to cost more, and you're going to have to rotate the either campaign frequency or like actual creative as well. So not only just the content that you're running, but the creative within the content to make sure that you can not exhaust that smaller audience. So those are the two main things.
Something that people often forget about. Maurice, what about you guys at LaunchDarkly?
Yeah, I mean, we have a mix of small and large audiences. I definitely think that the creative part, making sure that your audiences aren't getting the same ad for 6 months, that's a really good way to make sure a campaign does really badly. But like Sidney said, really making sure that you have a wide breadth of creative that's really good for these audiences, and can really help performance, just because like with these small audiences, if you aren't top of mind for them, it's not gonna prove well for you. I always think it's funny when we do use small audiences, like my like all the alarms go off. I'm like, oh my gosh, my cost per click is twice as much. But I'm like, all right, if we're tied to revenue, this doesn't matter. Like if my cost per lead is 2x, 3x what it's supposed to be, but down the line they're going to close for $50,000, I'm okay paying that. And I think it's hard to get that mindset, because as marketers, depending where you're started, where you've been, certain businesses who aren't tied to marketing, people who aren't tied to revenue, that's like the greatest sin. And so reframing your mind for dealing with small audiences, knowing what's going to happen going into it will help you, first help you with your performance, second help you with everything going through the funnel.